Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Sustainable Scoop. I'm here with my good friend, Joe Pelton. He's a PhD professor. He's a communications and a space expert. And the last time Joe came to see us, we talked about solar emissions.
That's right.
What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk today about man-made problems in space. Particularly, we're going to talk about orbital debris.
Space junk.
Space junk.
And tell us about all the junk in outer space.
Well, back in the 1970s, a man named Don Kessler, who's a scientist at NASA, he said if we aren't careful and start taking better care of the upper stage rockets that are left up in space and other things that could blow up, fuel tanks that could blow up, we could have a problem over time. And everybody at the time said, oh no, that won't be a problem. Space is too big. Well, over the last 30 years, space junk has built up. We've had collisions between Russian and Iridium satellites that created 3,000 new elements of debris. We had a Chinese rocket shooting down one of their old weather satellites, and that created another 3,000 elements. Today we have 22,000 major elements that are being tracked in outer space, and there is a concern that if we don't do better to get the space junk down. In fact, I have a new book coming out on active orbital debris and how we might do that. We really could be denied access to space, and that we wouldn't be able to launch our communication satellites, our navigation satellites like GPS and so on, if we keep building up the more and more debris, particularly in low Earth orbit, where we have some 4,000 tons of debris now.
And it's interesting that Kessler, the gentleman, mentioned that this was a concern, and he was referring to NASA. But as you mentioned, other countries are launching things into space, and really, if we don't work together, this only gets worse, correct?
That's right. There's a UN committee working on this issue, and all the space agencies have put together a committee that have guidelines about how to reduce the amount of debris that's going up.
Well, let's go ahead and watch the video and listen to Dr. Kessler talk a little bit about what he anticipated and what you say has come true. Let's watch.
Syndrome is really nothing more than the way nature operates, with orbits that cross one another. And they'll eventually collide with one another. They'll create smaller debris and a certain amount of larger debris. And then that larger debris can go on and cascade to create even more debris, and you can get a runaway cascading effect. When that's applied to low Earth orbit, that phenomena is taking place right now, but at a very slow rate. At about once every 10 years, we're seeing a collision between large objects, and then but that rate will increase even if we don't add any new objects to Earth orbit.
My goodness, Joe, that seems completely out of control. How to get a handle on the mess that we've made?
Well, you know, these 22,000 elements are being tracked. Some of them are small as like a baseball, but traveling at 10,000 miles an hour, that has the kinetic energy of a bomb. So this really is a problem, and the UN is working very hard to try to solve how we create debris.
So we're not only ruining our planet, but we're ruining outer space as well. And Mother Nature has something in store for us in outer space that we have to be aware of, not just what we're causing, but what's naturally coming our way. Tell us a little bit about your work with asteroids and comets.
Well, the book does cover asteroids problems, and the problem is that NASA first was told by Congress, find all the asteroids that are more than a kilometer in size. And then they said, well, gee, maybe we should get down to 140 meters in size and, you know, work to try to get an inventory of that. Well, the trouble is that we now know that the kinetic energy in 30 to 40 meter asteroids are enough to kill a city, to wipe out.
Oh no!
Yes, you know, San Francisco Bay could be wiped out by a 40 meter asteroid. And the thing is, the smaller these are, the more there are of them. And,
So they're very hard to track.
they're hard to track, and that we really do need better technology to figure out how to track these down, because there are a million of this size.
I'm going to let you finish, but let's go ahead and watch the video that you brought, a little bit about asteroids.
Impacts are tremendous events, and once you have a good solid orbit on them, you can predict 100 years ahead of time whether there is a likelihood of an impact with the Earth.
There are an estimated 500,000 to 1 million asteroids that are 30 meters or larger in size. At 30 meters, these are potential city killers. We now know that a 5-kilometer wide asteroid crashed into Earth 65 million years ago, and the residue...
My goodness, space is completely out of control. I'm really glad you're looking into this, and I am also glad that you're working with an international community to have this discussion. But in addition to being a space expert, Joe, you're also a communications, and from that I don't mean talking, I mean how we communicate globally with one another. And another book you're going to be working on has to do with cybersecurity. Can you give us a glimpse of that threat?
Well, again, there are threats that we can create here on Earth in outer space, and that all of the satellites that we operate for communications, for GPS, which the internet's dependent on, and so on. If we have cyber criminals, or even worse, techno-terrorists, sending up bogus commands to satellites, bad things can happen that way as well. And back several decades ago, some teenagers in New Jersey actually were able to get control of a satellite and send commands to fire the rockets in it.
Let me just say, I actually heard the other day also that somebody could actually take control of your car from a satellite and drive you to an undisclosed destination. So we've got a lot to worry about. But right now, I think the first thing people need to do is read your book, and your book is called Space Debris and Other Threats from Outer Space. And they're threats from outer space and threats that we deal with and we're creating here on Earth. Thanks so much for coming back to talk to us, Joe. We're going to have you back again. This is a fascinating subject. And viewers, I hope that you'll go online and take a look at the Arlington Weekly News and also the Sustainable Scoop so that you can watch this segment. Also the rest of Joe's video, which is called Cosmic Hazards. Thanks for watching the Sustainable Scoop. Back to the news desk.